My family invites me to my brother's wedding after having cut me off for years over a small incident, but now it's not small when his wife ends up annulling the marriage. A couple of days ago, I attended my brother's wedding and everything went wrong there. Although wrong doesn't accurately describe how badly things went, it was worse. And that's what I want to talk about, because my history with my family is complicated. My family says it's my fault, but I believe I only defended myself from their ambush. Basically, my brother and I haven't spoken in almost 6 years, and it's been the same with my parents, although at least they congratulated me on my birthdays and occasionally sent me greetings during the holidays. But that was the only contact I had with them in that time. I didn't have the kind of relationship with them that my brother had, no dinners with them every 2 weeks, no invitations to family events. The only time I really saw my family was at weddings, baby showers, or parties organized by other relatives. So clearly, for the last 6 years, they had pushed me out and basically alienated me from my own family because of my brother, over a single incident that happened 6 years ago and ruined everything. I'm now 30 and my brother is 28. 6 years ago, he made the decision to drop out of college and told our parents about it during Thanksgiving dinner. They were very understanding with him. I thought it was crazy, because he had no plan for the future. He simply said he wanted to leave college because he didn't think it was for him, and he thought he was destined for bigger things in life. I didn't even know what bigger things he was talking about. And as his older sister, I thought I could give him some realistic advice instead of inflating his ego like my parents were doing. So later that night, I tried to talk to him. I told him it wasn't a good idea and that he should probably reconsider. Not everyone has the opportunity to go to college, and he was throwing it away without a solid plan. If you told me your startup had received a $100 million investment round, I could understand. But this seemed like a decision just to not miss some new video game or something like that. He told me he had already decided. I tried to convince him otherwise, but after a while he just exploded and told me he didn't need life advice from a loser like me. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. The truth is that even before all that, my brother and I had started having a strained relationship. I suppose it all began when he was about 16 and began to realize that our parents preferred him and that he could get away with almost anything he wanted. Until then, he hadn't realized it, or maybe he didn't know how to take advantage of it, because before that, we got along pretty well, though we had our occasional fights. But after that, he became unbearable. He became very arrogant and conceited, and I stopped socializing with him as much as I used to. After I went to college, we barely spoke. So in reality, I should have anticipated his reaction when I tried to advise him to just stick it out a little longer, graduate, and then do whatever he wanted, at least he'd have his degree. Despite that, I was still surprised, and I actually felt quite offended because I didn't consider myself a loser. In my mind, I was doing fine. I had just graduated a few months earlier and had already started working. It was one of those jobs you get when you've just come out of college, but at least I was employed and thought I'd work my way up little by little. Yes, maybe I wasn't making a huge amount of money right after graduating, and I was living with several roommates to save on rent, but that didn't mean I deserved the loser label. I didn't like that at all, so we had a pretty nasty fight. We called each other a bunch of names, and I told him that at least what I had was mine and that I didn't have to depend on our parents for money like he did. And that was true. Our grandparents had paid for my college tuition and were doing the same for my brother. Aside from that, all the money I needed, I earned myself. I worked part-time jobs and did whatever I had to do to make sure I could support myself, and I usually didn't depend on my parents for money. But I couldn't say the same for my brother because, even though I had tried to work during the summers, even in high school, to earn my own money and be independent instead of depending too much on our parents, he never made any effort. Our parents didn't push him to do the same as they had with me. Anyway, I told him that he was the one who was dependent, the one who should be ashamed of himself, and that he was the real loser here. That got to him, and a couple of minutes later, my parents came over and told me to apologize. I had a fight with them too, because the way they constantly favored him over me had just worn me down. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left. I thought that eventually things would calm down and we could work things out. But we never did. And so here we are, my brother and I didn't speak for 6 years after that. Even though we saw each other at family events, my parents and I talked, but they were distant, probably because they didn't want to offend my brother. I made peace with this situation because, honestly, the more time passed, the less likely it seemed that I could fix things with my family. It's not that I wouldn't feel bad if I did, but there was nothing I could do about it, because I didn't think it was my responsibility, since I didn't believe the fight was my fault. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, I received an invitation to my brother's wedding. I knew he was engaged, but the fact that they invited me surprised me. It was probably a last-minute thing, and I almost didn't go, simply because I felt like this was something thought of at the end, and by then, I felt they were inviting me only out of obligation. But then my parents called me and told me my brother had been undecided about it, which is why it had taken so long to invite me. They really wanted me to attend, and they even put my brother on the phone, and he personally asked me to be there. He sounded polite enough, and my parents also sounded quite sincere, so I had no reservations. That's how I ended up attending the wedding, and it wasn't until I was there that I realized I had made a huge mistake. As soon as I arrived, in the first few seconds, people were surprised to see me, since it wasn't a secret that we had fought. But then, after the ceremony, my family came up to me, and I thought things would go well and that we would finally resolve everything. Instead, in front of the whole family, they began mocking me and putting me down. Everyone else became quite uncomfortable because no one expected this, even I was stunned. Because even though their tone was playful, I could tell they weren't really joking, and that they meant every word. They brought up the fight we had all those years ago and started mocking me, pointing out that my brother was now a successful businessman and that I was still struggling to make a name for myself in the same company. Just to clarify, that's not exactly true. I'm still at the same company I started with, but I've definitely worked my way up. Now I'm paid much more, and I'm definitely not in the same place I was when I began. Yes, maybe I don't have my own business like my brother, but I earn a good living and I'm comfortable, so I don't know where they were getting that from. Then they also started mocking me because not only was my brother successful in his career, he was now happily married and would soon have a family, while I didn't even have a boyfriend yet. Because if I had one, I would probably have brought him with me, since I definitely had permission to bring someone as a plus one. Anyway, they were making jokes about these hurtful things, and after a while, I realized the plan had always been to invite me just so they could put me down in front of everyone and get revenge for that stupid, insignificant fight from so many years ago. I was so angry I couldn't hold back anymore. I decided to tell my brother that he was the same loser he had been all those years ago, and that he had just proved me right by making his own wedding all about me and our fight. From the look on his wife's face, I could tell this hadn't been discussed with her, because she looked pretty shocked and was just standing there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. And I mentioned that too. I told him he was just proving what a big loser he was, that he wasn't insulting me, he was making a fool of himself. I called him every insulting name I could think of, then turned to my parents and told them they were failures who had always preferred my brother over me, and now they had raised an arrogant, brainless, narcissistic idiot, just like them. Then I turned and left. Later, I heard from several family members who had been present during the entire exchange that after I left, everyone was quite confused about what to do. But then people started realizing how bad things were, and began telling my parents and my brother what they thought. They tried to defend themselves, saying they were only joking and that I had misunderstood the situation, but no one believed them. People started leaving, and those who stayed witnessed a fight between my brother and his wife. Even her parents were pretty upset, they didn't like what had happened and thought it was humiliating, because even their guests began leaving due to how uncomfortable the whole situation was. My parents and my brother kept trying to defend themselves, saying it had all been in a joking tone and that I had taken it too seriously. But in the end, no one believed them. And worst of all was that my brother's wife actually ended up leaving the wedding with her parents because she didn't want to speak to him anymore. So basically, they think I ruined their wedding, and my parents now want me to apologize to everyone for taking a few simple jokes the wrong way. Hi, they've been emailing me, trying to call me, looking for any way to contact me, but I've been ignoring them because I know they weren't joking and I know I didn't overreact. But still, for my own peace of mind, I want to be sure. So, am I the bad one if I ask for my gift back to get my money? It was a last-minute gift because it was a last-minute invitation. It was just a set of towels, but I think I could use the money for something else. I know the rules of the sub are to ask if you're the bad one, but I'm not going to ask if I'm the bad one. After responding to their little jokes, I know I'm not, and it's not my fault that my sister-in-law didn't find them funny, same as the rest of the people. Update 1. I still haven't blocked my parents or anything like that. I think I'm kind of having fun with them in a way. I've let them keep sending me emails and messages that I don't respond to, but they're getting pretty desperate. I guess they really want the family to think I was the one who overreacted, and what better way to do that than to get me to admit it myself. They've tried everything. They've tried to get me to sympathize with them, saying they're going through a very hard time with the rest of the family against them. They even mentioned that my brother and his wife are fighting just a few days after their wedding, that she didn't even leave with him, and that most likely they'll even cancel their honeymoon soon if they don't resolve things. They're even talking about an annulment. When that didn't work, they started reminding me of everything they'd done for me, but that only made me more annoyed, because it's not like they were doing me a favor. I was their daughter, they had to do all that for me. They had to send me to school, bathe me, feed me, and keep me safe. That's nothing out of the ordinary, all parents do that. And if they didn't want to do it and considered it a favor, then they should have given me up for adoption or something. Or better yet, never had me in the first place. If they think they did something amazing just by being there for me and doing what all parents do, then they're gravely mistaken and delusional. But they're not as dumb as you'd think, because they realized none of that was going to work on me, so they started trying to apologize to me. But it was ineffective because the apology was more loaded with accusations than anything genuine. They said they were sorry for hurting my feelings with a few jokes, but they weren't just a few, and they weren't jokes. Maybe I'm the odd one here, but to me, a genuine apology has to do with regret for what you did, not with more accusations. But whatever, their intention was to hurt my feelings, and that's why it hurt. I wasn't overreacting, and making it seem that way wasn't helping me forgive them or feel moved. Because the family was angry with them, they thought they could play word games and I wouldn't notice, but I'm not stupid. No, I'm not going to accept a half-assed apology like that. It's not going to work on me. Anyway, I'll keep ignoring them, because my plan is not to forgive them, since it's become clear that a genuine apology from them is impossible. It's petty and personal, but I don't care, so that's my strategy to deal with this, just keep ignoring them. And even if I do get an apology from them, I'm not going to help them, because after everything that's happened, I think a simple apology is far too little, far too late. Who am I kidding? A real apology from my parents, that only happens in movies. My parents could die and come back to life 3 days later, and I still wouldn't have faith in them. So I really don't care what happens. I don't care about their image. I don't care about protecting them from anything. They can do whatever they want now. They can suffer whatever happens to them, because they brought it on themselves. I know the rest of the family isn't speaking to them, and I think that's a good thing. Maybe it will teach them a lesson they really need to learn, that they can't just mess with whoever they want and get away with it forever. My brother in particular needs to know that. I can't believe he did that at his own wedding, especially without his wife's consent. Because it wasn't just a day for him, it was for them. It's no surprise they're not speaking now, and if she has even a little common sense, she'll probably file for annulment at the very least. But I don't know her. The first time I saw her was at the wedding, and I don't know what she's like. I don't know if she's angry about what they did to me. I don't know if she's angry because he ruined the wedding. Or if she's simply doing it because she had doubts about getting married in the first place. I don't know her, so I don't know how she thinks. Update 2. To give you a timeline, it's been weeks since the wedding. And just a few hours ago I got a call from my brother. My parents had been sending me messages nonstop until a few days ago. But then suddenly it all stopped. No more emails, no more random phone calls, no more texts. The calm was unsettling. Too unsettling. It was like something worse was coming, like in one of those horror movies where everything is quiet and calm. But then the serial killer jumps out from the bushes and stabs you. Only in my movie, the villain is my parents, and they're even uglier. Ugh. I'm going to have trouble sleeping tonight thinking about that. But then today, I got that call from my brother, just hours ago. At first, I didn't think much of it, I simply blocked him. But then he started trying to call me from different numbers. I'm guessing he probably got his friends to call me or something, because there were a lot of numbers. Either that, or my brother runs a spam call company. More reasons to hate him. The kind that texts you at 3 in the morning trying to sell you a car. After about 30 minutes, I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I picked up one of the calls. It was him, on the other end, yelling at me. First, for not answering his first call. And what can I say, His Royal Highness probably thought he deserved to be answered on the very first ring. God forbid anyone let the phone ring, much less block him and force him to call from several numbers. The second thing was that his whole life was ruined, and, as always, it was my fault. I told him that he had ruined it himself. That he needed to take responsibility for his own actions and accept the consequences of what he'd done instead of looking for a scapegoat to blame. Now, that sounds much cleaner than how the call actually went. But I tried to say the same thing. I was about to hang up, but then he said he'd made a huge effort just to contact me, and that I shouldn't hang up. Because if I did, he would come see me in person, and there would be no way out of that. Great. First, I couldn't sleep with the image of my parents jumping out of the bushes. Now he'd given me even more reason to sleep with the lights on. And yes, I could call the police, but you know how it goes in those movies. Either the cops show up right as the credits are about to roll and the killer's already murdered half the cast, starting with the ones who wandered off to have sex. Or they arrive on time but, since they didn't get movie killer training, they're caught off guard and die while the protagonist screams as their only salvation bleeds out in front of them. I wasn't going to risk it. Also because I live in a neighborhood that's, well, not exactly drama-friendly. And they wouldn't like the noise or whatever scene he planned to make. Since I live alone with my cat, I sometimes end up relying on my neighbors. So keeping a good relationship with them is important to me. I don't know how he found out where I live, maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just using that against me because he thought it would affect my image somehow. But it worked, and I decided to stay on the call. I told him to be quick because I didn't have all day to deal with his problems. Also because I already had my movie marathon planned for the night. Yeah, I'm a bit of a masochist, I know. His demand was that I talk to his wife and convince her that I had overreacted. That what happened at the wedding was just jokes. And that my oversensitivity had turned such a beautiful day into the worst one possible. He wanted me to convince her to come back to him. Because right now she's staying with her parents. And it was all my fault for being thin-skinned. I told him I certainly could do that, but there was a tiny problem. When he asked what problem, expecting me to do it, not realizing it was a rhetorical question, I answered him. I told him that making the day beautiful was impossible. Sure, I could talk to her, but at the end of the day, she was marrying him. So that day was going to be horrible no matter what. Honestly, I don't understand why he didn't find that funny. Seeing as he's such a connoisseur of jokes, I thought one like that might amuse him. But he started yelling that he was being serious. And that he expected a different kind of treatment from me. I told him, you want to be serious? Let's be serious. Then I told him flat out that I wasn't going to do any of that. That he needed to solve his own problems. Because as far as I was concerned, none of this mattered to me. I also told him that if he showed up at my house, I wouldn't call the police. And then things would get even worse for him. Because I'd be waiting with traps and all sorts of gadgets to neutralize him. So the cops wouldn't have to suffer the usual movie ending. After saying that, I hung up and blocked that number. And I blocked all the other numbers he'd been calling from, just in case. Even so, he still managed to send me an email telling me I was the most horrible person he'd ever had the misfortune of being related to. He said that if his marriage ended, it would be my fault, and I'd have to live with that for the rest of my life. I replied that I could certainly live with that. It's pretty stupid, because I know for a fact that saving a woman from marrying him is something to be proud of. I know it's not my fault, and that his stupidity is his own problem. I can't believe my parents raised both me and him, and I turned out like this, and he turned out like that.